inspired by real-life events. Narrator Ryan Mitchell woke up at 6:11 a.m. inside a corporate emergency conference room, with security guards blocking the exits and a screen behind him showing his name under the title Internal Data, Leak Primary Suspect. And in that moment, his entire reality collapsed. Because just yesterday, he was a mid-level software reliability engineer at a major cloud infrastructure company in San Francisco, responsible for maintaining uptime systems for enterprise clients. And now he was being accused of leaking sensitive client architecture data that had triggered a multi-million-dollar security incident overnight. And the first thing Ryan felt wasn't panic. It was confusion so deep it felt unreal, because his life had always been structured around precision, logs, alerts, deployments, rollback safety, and controlled environments. But now he was inside a situation where control had disappeared completely. And within hours, his system access was revoked, his personal devices were confiscated, his apartment entry was restricted under corporate legal hold, and an internal security report labeled him as high probability insider, exfiltration vector. And Ryan sat there, watching executives discuss his life like a system failure case study, replaying his last shift in his mind, remembering code reviews, infrastructure checks, and a late-night deployment validation, and then a gap, an unexplained missing window between 1:42 a.m. and 3:05 a.m., where system logs showed elevated access activity from his credentials. But he had no memory of initiating any of it, and when security showed him dashboard recordings of data packets moving out through encrypted channels under his identity, Ryan immediately said, "That's not me." But the lead investigator replied coldly, "The system already confirmed it was." And that sentence felt heavier than any accusation, because it meant the system had already decided the truth before he could even defend himself. And by evening, he was released under strict monitoring, while his name was internally blacklisted across multiple departments. Ryan stood under the cold fog of San Francisco, realizing that in a digital world, identity is not what you are. It is what systems record you to be. And that night, he received a message on an encrypted burner channel saying, "If you want to understand the leak, meet at Pier 14. No security devices." And despite knowing it could be a trap, he went because when everything is already taken, caution stops mattering. And at the pier, he met Sophia Lang, a former cloud security architect who had worked on breach forensics and internal threat mapping. And she didn't waste time explaining comfort. She immediately showed him reconstructed access chains and said, "Your credentials were not used directly. They were replicated through a session hijacking layer embedded in your authentication node." And Ryan immediately responded, "Then I can clear my name." But Sophia shook her head and said, "You're still thinking like someone trying to prove innocence, not like someone inside a system designed to finalize blame before truth stabilizes." And she explained that the breach wasn't a simple hack, but a controlled internal exploitation of authentication tokens, where identity sessions could be duplicated in real time and routed through legitimate access points. And Ryan's profile had been chosen because it had deep system privileges without frequent anomaly flags, making him the perfect invisible carrier for data exfiltration. And suddenly, the case wasn't about stolen data alone. It was about identity replication inside cloud infrastructure. And Sophia offered him a choice: step away and let the system finalize him as the perpetrator, or help her trace the internal session replication chain before it was overwritten by automated incident containment protocols. And Ryan stood there, staring at the dark water, reflecting city lights, thinking about his younger brother depending on him for tuition, thinking about years of discipline, building a stable tech career, and thinking about how quickly everything could be rewritten without warning. And finally, he said, "If my identity has already been used without me, then I have nothing left to protect except the truth." And that decision pulled him into a hidden layer of infrastructure investigation where nothing remained stable. Because every log they examined was actively adjusting in real time, every trace they followed kept shifting as if the system was reacting to their presence. And soon they discovered the breach wasn't external infiltration, but internal privilege abuse, involving a senior cloud operations engineer who had been quietly rerouting authentication sessions and manipulating audit trails to hide large-scale client data extraction. And Ryan's identity had been selected as the central attribution point because it reduced internal investigation complexity and allowed faster containment narrative closure. And one night, while analyzing live authentication telemetry from a secure offline terminal, Ryan saw something that completely broke his understanding. His credentials were actively executing privileged data transfers in real time while he was physically sitting in front of a disconnected device. And Sophia immediately said, "They're simulating your identity continuously inside the system layer to preserve the framing." And Ryan realized he wasn't just being accused after the fact. He was being continuously overwritten inside a live digital narrative. And pressure escalated rapidly as anonymous threats began appearing on his devices, warning him to stop investigating or face irreversible legal and financial destruction. And sleep disappeared, trust collapsed, and even silence felt like monitored space. And at one breaking point, Ryan whispered, "I thought cloud systems were neutral infrastructure, but maybe they are just controlled narratives at scale." And Sophia replied, "Infrastructure is never neutral. It only reflects who has access to rewrite it." And that moment changed everything inside him, because he stopped trying to defend his name and started focusing only on exposing the mechanism. And as they dug deeper, they uncovered encrypted replication nodes inside the cloud control plane that were continuously generating synthetic access logs to distribute blame across multiple employee identities. And Ryan's profile had been amplified as the primary attribution target because it matched predictable behavioral patterns used by automated fraud detection systems. And when they finally compiled enough verified encrypted evidence to trigger federal cybersecurity escalation, internal containment protocols activated immediately, attempting to erase investigative trails across mirrored cloud regions. And Sophia said, "This is the point where most people get erased from the system without anyone noticing." And Ryan replied, "Then I'll be the anomaly they can't normalize." And together, they transmit secured evidence packets to federal cybercrime authorities while preserving decentralized backup chains across independent nodes. And within days, the investigation collapsed into a full-scale federal probe exposing internal cloud identity manipulation, session replication abuse, and coordinated data exfiltration across multiple enterprise clients. And arrests followed within senior infrastructure teams. And when it was over, Ryan stood on the same pier where everything began, watching the city lights reflect across the water, realizing that the most dangerous part of modern systems is not that they fail, but that they can convincingly assign failure to a single human being. And a week later, when he met Sophia one last time, she asked him, "What did this change in you?" And Ryan looked at the moving water and said, "It made me realize I was never just a user of systems. I was something systems could rewrite if I didn't fight back." And she asked, "And what did you gain?" And after a long pause, he replied, "The understanding that truth doesn't survive inside controlled infrastructure. It survives only in the people who refuse to accept a version of themselves written by something else." And as he walked away alone into the foggy night of San Francisco, he finally understood the deepest reality of his journey, that sometimes life doesn't destroy you with chaos. It quietly replaces your identity and waits to see if you accept it. But real survival begins the moment you refuse to live inside a version of yourself you never chose.